My wife, Emily, is slender, with striking blue eyes, fair skin dotted with freckles, and naturally blonde hair. Before we got married, back when we were still in college, she cheated on me once. I chose to forgive her. Lately, though, something felt off. Since the start of the year, subtle changes in her behavior reminded me of how she acted back then, when she was sneaking around in college. Then, there was the noticeable decline in our intimacy. The uneasy feeling grew stronger. I started seriously questioning whether my wife was being faithful. The simplest way to confirm my suspicions? Track her location. So, I activated the Find My Phone feature on her device. 2 days later, while sitting in my office at work, I checked the app. Emily's phone was still at home. That was strange. As a real estate agent, her job had her running all over town, but there was no reason for her to be at the house in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon. Something wasn't right. I told my boss I needed to step out for a long lunch and headed straight home. Pulling into the driveway, I only saw Emily's car parked outside. Maybe she just ran back for something, I told myself. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew. From upstairs, I heard voices. Moving quietly, I crept toward the bedroom door. Without stepping inside, I slipped my phone past the edge of the doorway, hitting record. On my screen, the scene unfolded in real time. My wife, tangled up in bed with both of our neighbors, Michael and David. Both men were married, with young kids of their own. But what caught my attention, aside from the obvious, was the large rubber sheet covering the bed. That was new. I had never seen it before. This whole thing had been planned. I never knew Emily had these preferences. The one time I had tried to be more dominant with her, she completely shut me down, then froze me out for a month, telling me, I'm not that kind of girl. I glanced at my phone screen again. Yeah, I had all the proof I needed. Without a word, I stepped away from the doorway and made my way to the kitchen. I poured myself a drink and sat down, processing what I had just witnessed. One thing was clear. I wanted nothing to do with Emily anymore. Out loud, to no one but myself, I muttered, I need to make a plan. And then, a thought hit me. A slow, calculated smirk crossed my face. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I went to the fridge, pulled out every bottle of wine except one, and stashed them away in the cabinets. Then, I reached into Emily's purse, found her sleeping pills, crushed up 2, and mixed them into the last remaining bottle in the fridge. Back at the dining table, I pulled out my laptop. The sounds from upstairs told me they were still at it. That was fine. I had things to take care of. First, I removed Emily from my medical will and life insurance. Then I split our finances. After that, I downloaded the do-it-yourself divorce papers for our state and started filling them out. Eventually, I heard the shower turn on. It stayed running for over an hour. Perfect. From my spot at the dining room table, I had a clear view of the staircase, which led straight to the front door. When they finally came downstairs, all 3 of them, I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and said, You guys are so caught. I sent your little performance to your wives. Enjoy your divorces. They froze mid-step. Total shock. Michael was the first to recover. His face twisted with rage as he bellowed. What did you do? Michael was bigger than me by about 2 inches and 20 pounds, though most of it was fat. Didn't matter. I met his glare and said, I ended your marriage the same way you ended mine. His fists clenched. His jaw tightened. I'm gonna hurt you, he growled. Before he could even think about acting on that threat, I stood up, grabbing the 2 carving knives I had stashed under a table napkin. Stepping forward, I locked eyes with Michael and asked, What about you, David? You feeling brave too? David shook his head fast. No, man. I'm not part of this. I pointed to the door with my left-hand knife. Then leave. David didn't waste a second. He bolted. I smirked at Michael. There goes your backup. Just you and me now. His face burned red with fury. You know, I mused, stepping closer. I never liked you, Michael. You're a lying, backstabbing piece of trash. And the funny thing is, you've always hated me, too, because I see right through you. Michael seethed. I'm gonna take that knife from you and break you. I took another step forward, leveling the blade at his face. Go ahead. Try. His eyes darted to the knife. You make a move for this one, and I'll bury the other straight into your gut. Or maybe I'll jam this one into your eye first. What do you think? Michael didn't move. I grinned. Come on, big guy. You're always bragging about how tough you are, how you never back down. Well, now's your chance. Then, quick as a flash, I lunged forward with a feint. Michael flinched. If he hadn't flinched, he'd be walking around with one less eye. The realization hit Michael fast. This wasn't a bluff. I saw the shift in his expression, the moment fear took over. And when I noticed the dark stains spreading down his pant leg, I knew he'd do nothing more than run his mouth. I tilted my head, looking him over with exaggerated disappointment. Michael, you're making a mess on my floor. My voice dripped with mockery. Get out of my house. Screw you, he screamed, but his voice cracked with panic. Then, logic caught up, and he turned and bolted out the door. I stepped to the doorway, watching him sprint down the street like a scared kid. Shame. I muttered to no one in particular. I really hate that guy. Would have been nice to see him squirm a little longer. With Michael gone, I turned to Emily. She was pale, her whole body rigid with fear. I shut the door, then faced her with an unsettling grin. Come on, dear. Let's have a little chat. And do be careful, don't step in what's left of tough guy's dignity. I strolled back to the dining room table, slipping the knives back beneath the napkin. With a casual motion, I gestured for her to sit. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before practically scurrying into the chair across from me. Her hands trembled as she fidgeted in place, trying to regain composure. In a voice that was small, shaky, and desperate, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't even glance up. Flipping through the papers in front of me, I responded flatly. Oh, I know. You're definitely sorry. A sorry excuse for a person. Before she could spew out some pathetic excuse, I slid the divorce papers across the table, tapping a finger on them for emphasis. I went ahead and filled these out. It's a no-fault state, so everything gets split 50-50. You get the house, I keep my 401k. I've already moved my half of our accounts into a separate one, paid off the credit cards, and cancelled them. I want this done quickly, so I'm being fair. But let me make one thing very clear, no alimony. Emily's trembling stopped. The second she realized she wasn't getting everything she wanted, the fake remorse vanished. No way, she snapped. I know my rights. You make way more than I do. I'm getting alimony, and the house. I smirked, pulling out my phone and tilting the screen toward her. Paused on display was the video, the one featuring her and our two very married neighbors. Are you sure about that? I asked smoothly. Because I'm more than happy to share this with your parents. Maybe even the rest of your family. Hell, I could make sure any man you ever tried to date gets a copy. So much for locking down a rich husband to fund your little dreams. Her face twisted in rage. That's blackmail, she shrieked. I shrugged. Not my fault that Michael's and David's wives decided to forward the video. They must really hate you for wrecking their families. Then I pointed to the documents. Sign them. This is the best deal you're gonna get, and the longer you drag this out, the more likely that video spreads even further. She glared at me but snatched up the pen and signed where I had marked. Good, I said, collecting the papers. I'll file these today. I'm moving out, so I'll be in and out over the next few days. I already took time off work, so do me a favor, just stay out of my way. I'm not letting you take whatever you want. I'm watching you. Fine. Your choice. With that, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. underscore 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 underscore. By the time I returned with a rental van, Emily was waiting in the living room, perched on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. She had changed into something revealing, completely inappropriate given the circumstances. I barely stepped inside before holding up my phone. "I'm recording. Might want to rethink your wardrobe." She smirked and struck a provocative pose. "Don't you still love me?" I didn't bother answering. Every part of me wanted to hit her with a sharp remark, something to cut her down, but I knew silence would get under her skin more than anything. So I kept quiet. "You're gonna miss me," she cooed. I gave her a blank look, the kind you'd give when catching a whiff of something rotten. Then, without another glance, I walked upstairs and started packing my clothes. Emily followed, stretching herself across the bed like some seductive prize. She cycled through every trick in the book: apologies, excuses, manipulative sweet talk. For 20 minutes she went on. Then, when none of that worked, she shifted tactics. "I miss you," she whispered. "Come back to me." I didn't react. Didn't acknowledge her words, her presence, nothing. That's when she got desperate. When my back was turned, she slid off the bed and pressed herself against me, arms reaching around for an embrace. "Come on, baby," she purred. "I'll make it up to you. Just give me one more chance." I remained stone cold. My rage and disgust overpowered any lingering emotions I might have had. She finally realized she wasn't getting anywhere. Letting out a frustrated huff, she stepped back, storming toward the bedroom door. Then, with pure venom in her voice, she snapped, "Maybe if you had been a better husband, I wouldn't have needed other men." I kept folding my clothes, never sparing her a glance. That only made her angrier. Stomping down the stairs, she continued her tantrum, yelling accusations as she went. "If you actually paid attention to me, none of this would have happened. You're never gonna take me back unless you admit that this is your fault." At the bottom of the staircase, she hurled her final rant. "You'll never fix this until you apologize for how you treated me." I sighed, shaking my head. What a train wreck. I walked into the kitchen and examined the bottle of wine. It was almost empty. I walked over to Emily and gave her a nudge. She was asleep. Leaning in closer, I yelled her name in her ear. No response. Feeling pleased with myself, I smiled and said out loud, "I love it when a plan comes together." I slid her wedding ring off her finger and put it in my pocket. I set her phone to airplane mode and tucked it into a kitchen drawer. I closed all the blinds in the house. The front door had glass panels, so I covered them with a black blanket I had purchased earlier. I did the same for the windows on the garage doors. I also disconnected the front doorbell. For the rest of the evening, I focused on boxing up everything I wanted from the house. The most valuable things went first: her expensive jewelry, her high-end kitchen appliances, anything that would be a pain for her to replace. Her sleeping pills lasted a solid 8 hours, and even after waking up, she'd be groggy for at least another hour. To be thorough, I crushed another pill and sprinkled the powder into her open mouth, then poured a little wine down after it. She coughed briefly but swallowed. I repeated this process every 6 hours. By 8 a.m. I woke up, made myself breakfast, and then headed outside to make a few adjustments. I used a padlock to secure the side gate. Then I carried Emily outside and set her down in a lawn chair. For privacy, I strung a rope between the trees and hung large beach towels over it. If any of the neighbors happened to glance in this direction, all they would see was a normal setup, just some towels drying near the pool. What they wouldn't see was Emily, completely motionless, baking in the sun. I spent the rest of the day loading the van, making trips to my storage unit, and dropping off personal belongings at my extended stay motel room. Every 6 hours, another sleeping pill. Every hour, a slight adjustment to Emily's chair to make sure she stayed in direct sunlight. By noon, things got interesting. Someone started pounding on the front door. I peeked through the window. It was David's and Michael's wives. They were shouting, "Come on out here, you homewrecker. I swear to God I'm gonna hurt you. You can't hide forever, you disgusting bitch." I stood there, watching them fume. They rattled the side gate but didn't bother climbing over. From the outside, the house looked dark, abandoned. After about 5 minutes of cursing and yelling, they left. Emily, of course, remained unaware. By sunset, her skin was red, an angry, blistering shade of red. I carried her inside, placing her back on the couch. Even standing a few feet away, I could feel the heat radiating off her body. I turned on the ceiling fan to keep her cool. Setting my alarm for another 6-hour interval, I continued the routine through the night. Friday morning at 9 a.m., I carried Emily back outside. By 1 p.m., the pain finally woke her up. I watched her stagger into the house, her movements slow, uncoordinated. Her face was swollen, her skin raw. I rushed over, putting on my best concerned voice. "Emily, what happened to you? You're so sunburned. Here, lie down. Drink this water." I helped her onto the couch and handed her a glass of water. Inside, of course, was another sleeping pill. She barely managed to drink before passing out again. I carried her back outside. Then I went back into the house and finished cleaning up. I emptied 2 bottles of wine and thoroughly washed the lace bottle and the glass she had used. By sunset, I brought Emily back in. Her body radiated heat. Her skin was beginning to blister. 2 days of uninterrupted sun exposure. I let the sedative wear off. Then I removed all the evidence. The blanket covering the front door? Gone. The blinds? Opened. The padlock on the side gate? Removed. The rope and towels in the backyard? Taken down. By 8 p.m., I poked Emily in her sunburned belly. No reaction. An hour later, I tried again. This time, she woke up screaming, "Don't touch me." I put on my best act. "Emily, I need to take you to the hospital. You fell asleep in the sun and got badly sunburned." Her eyes, still groggy, flickered open. "Where am I? I hurt." I put a hand on her shoulder, pretending to be alarmed. "My God, Emily, I have to get you to the hospital. You look horrible. Your face is all swollen." Emily gingerly pulled on her robe, every movement painful. I carried her to the car. Her feet were burned so badly she couldn't even walk. After admitting her to the ER, a doctor came out to ask me some questions. "How many hours was she in the sun?" I shook my head, feigning concern. "I don't know. I recently moved out. Luckily, I had to go back home to get some things when I found her on the couch." "You think she'll be all right?" The doctor sighed. "We won't know the full extent of the damage until the swelling goes down." "How bad is it?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "She has second-degree burns covering the entire front of her body," the doctor said. "Possibly some third-degree burns in certain areas." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "She also has sun poisoning," he continued. "We're hydrating her to bring down the fever and swelling. We'll know more after some time." The doctor walked off, leaving me alone with my thoughts. After a moment, I stepped into Emily's hospital room. They had wrapped her in burn gauze, front to back, head to toe. A thick pad covered her lower half, which made sense. I had made sure she was always positioned directly under the sun, legs spread, no part of her untouched by the heat. A pretty nurse approached me with a clipboard. "Are you the husband?" "Ex-husband," I corrected. She nodded. "Can you provide her insurance information?" "Nope. Dropped her from my insurance. I don't think she has any other coverage." The nurse frowned. "So, she has nothing? You'll have to ask her when she wakes up." I turned on my heel and left the hospital. The next day, while I was in the middle of packing up the house, 2 police officers showed up. One questioned me while the other casually wandered through the downstairs and into the backyard. He spent a lot of time in the kitchen and laundry room. The first officer pulled out a notepad. "We have some questions about your wife's sunburn, which resulted in her hospitalization." "You mean my soon-to-be ex-wife, Emily?" I corrected. "We're divorcing." "I see." He scribbled something. "Can you tell me when you last saw your wife before the sunburn?" "Thursday," I said. "I came by a few times to get my stuff." "She was sitting on the couch." "Did she appear to have been tanning that day?" "Yes, she had a nice red tint all over her body." "What time was this?" "Around 8 p.m. "How were you able to determine the extent of her tan?" "She was undressed," I answered. "I caught her Wednesday screwing my two neighbors. She was trying to persuade me not to divorce her." The officer glanced at me. "I see." I shrugged. "When I came by Friday morning to grab more of my stuff, she was still outside tanning." "Did she acknowledge you?" "Oh, yeah. She came inside when she saw me. Undressed. Drunk. Feeling sorry for herself." "She tried to talk to you again?" "She tried to get me to reconsider," I said, shaking my head. "Got mad when I said no. I took my things and left. She was back outside by the time I drove off." "She had a bottle of wine with her?" "She usually drinks a couple of glasses when she lays out in the sun," I said. "When I found her Friday night, there were 3 empty bottles on the counter. She normally doesn't drink that much unless she's out there with friends. But you know, she drinks more when she's depressed. And she was definitely depressed about the divorce." "Can you give us the names of her friends? The ones she usually tans with?" I smirked. "Sure. But they hate her now." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" "The 2 guys I caught her with? Those were their husbands." There was a moment of silence. The officer nodded slowly. "I see." Then came the kicker. "Your wife claims you drugged her and left her in the sun." I blinked. Then I laughed. "She blames me for being an idiot?" I shook my head. "I always told her not to drink when she took those damn sleeping pills." "So she takes sleeping pills regularly?" "Yes. She has a prescription. Takes them like candy when she wants to sleep, when she's depressed, or when she's in pain. Honestly, she mixes them with alcohol all the time. They make her higher than a kite." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "I see. Well," he said, tucking away his notepad. "Thank you for your time." As they turned to leave, I gave them my most genuinely confused expression. Just for the hell of it. Honesty is always the best policy with the cops. As soon as they were gone, I swapped my small moving van for a bigger one. I needed the space. Furniture, tools, everything that was still worth something. By Monday, I put the house up for sale. 2 days later, Emily called. "Honey, can you bring me some clothes?" I smiled to myself. "Nope, not gonna happen." "Why don't you ask Michael or David to run your errands for you?" "Honey, I need your help." "Can't you forgive me?" "Just a little bit." "You already got your little bit of help from me," I said. "I carried your sorry ass to the car and drove you to the hospital. Don't ever call me again." I hung up. By the time Emily got out of the hospital, I had taken everything from the house except for a few select items. Her oldest, most worn-out clothes. A handful of her cheap makeup. Our bed. And, of course, the rubber sheet. I had found the rubber sheet stuffed at the bottom of the laundry basket, sealed in a Ziploc bag. She clearly hadn't had time to clean it. I left the bed bare, no sheets, no blankets, no pillows. Just the rubber sheet. I also made sure to turn off the central air before I left. Let the house get nice and toasty for her sunburned return. Everything I wanted, I put in storage. Everything I didn't want, I either sold at a resale shop or threw away. The wedding album? Burned. The digital copies? Deleted. Her wedding dress? Went up in flames. From that point forward, we communicated only through our lawyers. Emily sent me hundreds of texts and emails, mostly desperate apologies, but also plenty of threats. Especially after she came home to find the house completely emptied. And then she tried to fight the divorce papers she had already signed. She needed money. Emily had become a vampire, forced to avoid the sun at all costs. Even the slightest warmth against her clothing made her wince in pain. Obviously, she had to quit her job as a real estate agent. Who would want to tour houses with a blotchy, blistered mess who couldn't even step outside in daylight? That didn't stop her from trying to fight the divorce, though. She claimed she had signed the papers under duress and that I had stolen everything from the house. Naturally, she also demanded alimony. But luck was on my side. The house sold before the divorce was finalized. When I threatened to hold up the sale and withhold her share of the proceeds, she finally backed down and stopped contesting the divorce. She was desperate for money, and she knew it. A month after the divorce, after dark, there was pounding on my apartment door. I had been expecting this. Peering through the peephole, I saw her. Emily. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I dropped her off at the hospital, but there she was, swaying slightly, looking like she had been drinking. I sighed and opened the door. She shoved her way inside without hesitation. "What do you want, Emily?" "I want a drink. There's a bottle of wine in the fridge." She went straight to it, grabbed the already open bottle, and took a deep swig straight from it. Then she grabbed a glass, poured herself a full serving, and emptied the bottle entirely. Glass in hand, she plopped down on my couch like she owned the place. I sat across from her, raising an eyebrow. "Why don't you make yourself at home?" Without missing a beat, she shot back. "I will." She peeled off her light jacket and leaned back into the couch, revealing a skimpy crop top that was barely more than a bikini. She was trying to act confident, but I could see it, her usual arrogance, that entitled, I always get my way attitude. She was waiting for me to react. So I studied her. Really looked at her. Her skin had taken a serious beating. Wrinkles, dark moles, patches of uneven color, white, red, and gray blotches scattered across her body. And her face? No makeup. That meant the doctors must have told her not to wear any, probably to prevent infection. But the biggest change was her nose. What had once been a cute, delicate feature was now a swollen, scarred mess. It had lost all its softness, replaced by rough bumps and discoloration. Then there was the rest of her body. Dark moles covered her arms and shoulders. The peeling had been extensive, leaving her with a patchwork of damaged skin. This was the same woman who had always flaunted herself, who used her looks as a weapon to manipulate men, including me. Now she was desperately trying to recapture that power. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I let every ounce of my disinterest show on my face. Emily visibly shrank. The confidence evaporated from her posture, and her expression faltered. What did she expect? She had spent her whole life getting by on her beauty, using her body to charm her way out of trouble. But the sun had taken that from her. Instead of gradually losing attention over the next 25 years, she had lost it overnight. Especially from me. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked flatly. She tried to smile, warming her voice. "I want you to give me another chance." I let out a humorless chuckle. "Love is trust. I don't trust you." Her lips parted, but I didn't give her a chance to speak. "Instead of improving our relationship, you selfishly hid the most exciting side of yourself from me and gave it to others. No matter what excuses you come up with now, your actions said I wasn't worth the effort." Her jaw tensed. "It didn't take anything away from our relationship. I was still the same housewife I always was." I scoffed. "You should have used that energy to add life to our marriage, not poison it." For a moment, I could see the panic flicker in her eyes. She had come prepared with a well-rehearsed script, but I had completely thrown her off track. "What do you really want, Emily?" I pressed. Her fake smile disappeared. "I want you to pay for my medical bills." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You shouldn't have taken me off your health insurance," she continued, trying to sound firm. "We weren't officially divorced yet." "Actually," I said, "that's exactly how a divorce works. We separate finances. We stop living together. That's how it's done." Her expression darkened. Her new, droopy eyelids made her look permanently exhausted. "You did this to me," she said bitterly. "You owe me." I let out a short laugh. "Oh yeah? And what are you gonna do about it? Go to the police?" She hesitated. "That won't work," I said, shaking my head. "The police already came months ago. They questioned me. If anything was gonna happen, it would have happened then, or at the divorce hearing. Nobody believes your crazy story." Emily's hands tightened around her wine glass. "I know you did this to me." I shrugged. "What? Let you drink yourself into a coma while you baked in the sun? Didn't realize that was a crime." Her voice cracked. "How could you? You love me." I met her gaze deadpan. "Wrong. Loved you. Past tense." A silence stretched between us. Then, in the smallest, most pitiful voice, she whispered, "I need your help." I said nothing. "I have a mountain of medical bills," she continued. "I'm out of money. I need more skin treatments. Maybe even skin grafts." She looked at me with those damaged eyes, trying to force tears that wouldn't come. The sunburn had likely wrecked her tear ducts. "I still love you," she pleaded. "I know you loved me. We could still love each other." I sighed. "Why don't you ask David or Michael for help? They were real close to you too." Emily's face twisted into something bitter. "They're both divorced. Broke. And they want nothing to do with me." A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. "A few weeks after our split, Michael came to my hotel room," she muttered. "Tried to reclaim something, I guess. Maybe he thought it would help him feel like a man again." I just stared at her, unblinking. And suddenly, Emily realized something. I wasn't going to help her. I wasn't going to pity her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to love her. She had lost. The moment Emily had arrived at my apartment that night, I knew it was just another one of her manipulative attempts to get something from me. But I wasn't going to fall for it again. She had tried so hard to relive the past, to somehow rewind the clock and make everything go back to the way it was. But I could see in her eyes that she had underestimated just how far gone we were. She kept trying to play the emotional card, but it was all too transparent. She wanted me to feel sorry for her, to give her another chance. But it was over. She had done too much damage. Emily tried to act as though everything was fine, making herself at home, drinking my wine like it was still her house. But the truth was, I wasn't falling for any of it. She told me about her interactions with Michael and David, the ways she had destroyed their relationships and taken their trust for granted. She relished in the chaos she caused, as if the destruction of their lives somehow gave her a sense of control. But as she spoke, I could see the cracks in her facade. Emily was unraveling. She spoke of Michael's humiliation and how she had used his weakness to her advantage. She spoke about David's vulnerability, how she had seduced him, and how now, both men were paying the price. But Emily didn't realize the truth. She had already broken those men, yes, but the real damage she caused was to herself. Her bitterness, her manipulations, her insecurities, it was all catching up with her. She had tried to use her beauty, her sexuality, and her charm, but now, she had nothing left. The sunburn had stripped her of that power. And as she sat there, crying and asking for help, I couldn't help but feel a cold emptiness inside me. She was a broken shell of the woman I once knew, desperate for validation and pity. But I wasn't going to give her that. "Why don't you offer them the same things as before?" Emily asked, hoping I'd return to my old self and fall for her tricks again. I shook my head. "I can't be intimate anymore." Her eyes flashed with a mix of curiosity and frustration. "Why not? Catch an illness?" I let the bitterness in my voice drip as I spoke. "No. The sunburn." Ouch. Sensitive areas hurt that bad? She blinked, unsure of what I meant, and I could see the realization hit her. "You have no idea," I added, letting her stew in the discomfort of the truth. The pain in her expression grew. Emily couldn't hide the agony in her voice as she sobbed. The sunburn damaged me permanently. She wailed, the tears flowing freely now. I leaned forward, watching her closely as she continued through her sobs. My sensitive areas were sunburned just as bad as the rest of me. After the skin peeled off, I lost all feeling in those areas. The doctor said the feeling might come back, but I can't feel anything anymore. I can't enjoy intimacy anymore. And there it was. Her final confession. Her last attempt to make me feel sorry for her. But there was no sympathy left in me. She cried harder, expecting me to swoop in, to hold her, to comfort her, to offer the same kind of emotional support I had once. But that man, the one who cared for her, was gone. Instead, I grabbed her wine glass and handed it to her. She took it, gulping down a couple of large sips to soothe her nerves, but the damage was done. She smiled weakly at me, trying to win me back with that same empty expression she had used countless times before. But I wasn't fooled. I smiled, not out of affection, but out of sheer amusement. Emily still thought she could fix everything with a few tears, a provocative outfit, and a small smile. She had ripped my heart out and trampled all over it, yet she thought I would be the one to pick up the pieces. I leaned in close, stood her up gently, and guided her to the door. As I opened it, she pressed herself against me, as if her body could still hold any power over me. She looked up into my eyes, that familiar glint of hope still lingering there. "Don't you still love me?" she asked softly, as if she could somehow change the past with that question. I looked deep into her eyes and slowly shook my head. "Why?" I replied, my voice cold. "Everything about you that I loved is gone." I didn't wait for another word. Slowly, deliberately, I shut the door in her face. And with that I ended it. No more second chances. No more hope. Just a broken past and a final door closed on everything that could have been. And I felt nothing. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the story. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.